Now that we have created the submacros and macros and submacros, the macro and submacros, we created the navigation form or the main menu. We created the UI macros, that's the user interface macros for the two data sheet tables. We need to review how to create and use a data macro. Data macros are highly specific and provide instructions for making logic-based adjustments to data, such as updating, calculating, or deleting data records in a table. The possible event are in the before change. They could be before delete event, or after inserted event, an after update event, or an after delete event property. In this case, for Bavant Publishing, the data macro will run or execute after a data entry user makes a change to a record in the seminar offerings table, but before the record is actually updated in the database. And this is just to ensure that keying errors are not made. So Bavant Publishing wants to prevent users from entering invalid data into the database, and using the data macro will help ensure that. So we're going to begin by following the steps on page that begin on page AC 511. And well, actually the verbiage begins on page AC 510, but we're going to follow the steps. The actual steps begin on page 511. So let's just start with that. And we're going to open the seminar offerings table in datasheet view. So we're just going to open that in datasheet view, and we can look at it now. And we see we have table tools open. We want to look at the table menu. And then once we do, we see some options here. We have table properties. We have some before events and some after events. And we want to choose the before change. So before the change is made, we want to look to see exactly, we want to make sure that the change is okay, that it qualifies. So we're going to say before change, and then the macro builder opens automatically. So what we want to do first is create the macro, and the macro is shown on page 511 in figure 8-56. So we're going to start out the macro with an if statement. And if we just double click if, we'll get the if statement. And we want to say if hours spent greater than total hours, then we're going to set a field so that the hours spent has the same value of the total hours. So let's just put in that code first. So we're going to say hours spent. Remember, all fields are in brackets. And you see it will start populating hours spent. Hours spent, if hours spent is greater than total hours, then we wanted to set a field. And we can choose here, set field, and we want that field to be hours spent. And we're going to double click it. That's really strange. Shouldn't do that. Alright, we're going to put in the field, and we're going to set the value so if it's greater than that, it will stop at the total hours. So it'll stop at that number. So we're going to make this, so we're going to make it equal to total hours. Okay, otherwise we're going to add an else if. Otherwise, we want to say if the hours spent is less than 0, then we're going to set the total of the hours spent to 0. So we're going to say if hours spent, and there it is less than 0, then we want to keep the count for the hours spent. So then we're going to set the field where hours spent can't type today, is equal to 0. And that's the end of that macro. That ends the whole statement. That's all of it. And we're going to save it and close it. Okay, so let's look at the table to see if this now works. So we looked at the table, And we told it in the macro that if the hours, so that if someone enters this and they change the hours spent, all right, we said if hours spent was greater than hours, than total hours, then change the total hours to match that number. So let's close this table and reopen it. So look at it now. So we're going to close this and reopen it. So you see we have some differences now. We said if hours spent was greater than total hours, then we want to use the total hours number. Basically is what that's saying. And if it's less than total, then if hours spent is less than 0, we want to use 0. So let's close this and open this back up. And the total hours is greater than the hours spent, then we use the hours spent number as the max. That's basically all that indicates. So this macro is done, and that's all there is to this. That's it. Okay, bye.